Hi guys, today we will look at exam questions and answers on the poem The Garden of Love by William Blake. Let's look at the first question. Refer to line 1, I went to the Garden of Love. Now I've put two questions here that expect the same answer, and they actually are asking the same thing, but they're just worded differently. Let's have a look at each of these questions and see how they differ. Let's look at the first one. How does the word garden create an expectation in the mind of the reader? So essentially this question is asking us, what do we as readers expect to see or hear in the poem when we read the word garden? Let's look at the next one. What images do the words Garden of Love in lines 1 and 7 evoke in the reader? So here once again the question is asking us to comment on what we expect to see in the poem or what experiences we expect to feel or read about when we see the words Garden of Love in the poem. So essentially it's asking us the same thing as the previous question. And it's important to note that this question is worth 3 marks, so we have to give 3 really good facts. Let's look at the answer. The word garden creates the expectation. Notice how we use keywords from the questions in our answers, and this helps us to make sure we answer the question fully. So, the word garden creates the expectation that the reader went to a place that was open, free, and beautiful. That's what we expect to see and hear when we see the word garden in the poem. It's an open, free, and beautiful place. It also creates an expectation within the reader of a state of being that is joyful, free, and peaceful. So here we comment on the experiences we expect to have or the emotions and state of being we expect to feel when we are in a garden, and that is joyful, free, and peaceful. The allusion to the biblical Garden of Eden also fuels the expectation of spiritual perfection and natural beauty. We expect to hear about something that is naturally beautiful, and because of this allusion to the Garden of Eden, we sort of expect a state of spiritual perfection and closeness with God. Let's look at the next question. Refer to lines 3 to 4. Explain the significance of these lines in context of the poem. So here we have to discuss sort of the meaning of these lines. We also need to discuss why these lines are important in the poem and what they actually mean in context of the whole poem. Let's look at the answer. Instead of offering a joyful experience, the chapel, which symbolizes organized religion, intrudes on the poet's pleasant memories, his joy. So organized religion is intrusive, and it sort of has this negative effect on the poet's joy and his memories. Now we're going to use the keyword from the question. These lines are significant as they show how Blake disapproves of the invasive, restrictive, and destructive nature of organized religion. So here we actually discuss why these lines are important, why they are significant in context of the poem. It actually shows us the poet's perspective and how he feels about the chapel. Let's move on. Question 3. Refer to lines 5 to 6. Discuss how the diction in these lines contributes to the speaker's tone. This is a 3-mark question. I want you to note that the word diction is just a fancy way of saying word choice. This question wants us to discuss why the speaker chose certain words in lines 5 and 6. The words gates and shut have connotations of restriction and lack of freedom and welcome. Connotation means they are associated with something, and in this case, it's a negative association. It sort of has a negative vibe attached to these words. Thou shalt not alludes to the 10 Commandments and reinforces the idea of restriction. Thou shalt not is a command, and it sort of forces you to do something. It's as if you don't have a choice, you need to do it. You will not. There's no question about it. And this reinforces restriction, oppression, and once again, negative vibes. This causes the speaker to have an indignant, angry, disappointed, and dismayed tone. Here again, we answer the question. We comment on these words and the effect it has on the speaker's tone. Let's look at question 4. Refer to the final stanza. Comment on how these lines convey the central idea of the poem. Okay, we need to say how the last stanza shows us the central idea of the poem. By contrasting the image of flowers, which symbolizes joy in life, with graves and tombstones, which symbolizes death, the speaker conveys how organized religion is killing one's joy in life. So here we've explained what the poet is saying in those lines. Now we need to comment on the central idea of the poem. And here we say, the central idea of the poem is made clear. Religion is restrictive and oppressive of freedom and joy. So religion in this case is restrictive and oppressive, and it sort of takes away your joy. And that's what we see in the images provided in the last stanza. We see flowers, symbolic of joy and life, and we see tombstones and graves, symbolic for death. And in the last part, we just say, these images make the idea of the poem clear. Religion is restrictive and oppressive. And this line over here, binding with briars my joys and desires, shows us again, binding, you are restricting something, and briars are actually thorny bushes which would hurt you if you were to touch. So here again, binding my joys and desires, the poet feels like his joys and desires are restricted and he has no free will. Question 5. Discuss the effect of the sound repetition in lines 11 and 12. This is a 2-mark question. So let's see what sound repetition happens in those lines. So here we identify the sound repetition. It is called alliteration, but we say the alliteration or sound effect created by binding with briars. We see the repetition of the b sound, and this emphasizes the restriction caused by organized religion and how it prevents the speaker from experiencing joy and pleasure. So here we've identified the sound repetition, we've shown where it happens, b, and we've also given a reason why the poet has included this sound repetition. Let's move on. Question 6. What does the poet's use of the word chapel suggest about the state of the garden? This is a 2-mark question, and it's important to note that chapel has a capital C. Let's see why this is the case. The poet writes chapel with a capital letter to emphasize that it is invading the garden scenery and that it is not natural and does not belong in the garden. The chapel does not belong there, and the poet gives it a capital C to show that it is taking up space, it is big. The chapel appears repressive, strict, and joyless because of the shut gates and strict words written, thou shalt not. It has destroyed the life that once was in the garden, and this is symbolized with flowers. So the flowers, the joy and the life, were replaced with graves and tombstones, with death. So basically, the joy is taken away. Comment on the poet's use of punctuation in line 6. The words thou shalt not are followed by a full stop in the middle of line 6. This emphasizes the meaning of the words and forces the reader to consider what the sign forbids. The full stop forces you to pause and reflect on what is being said. The full stop also emphasizes that the chapel is unwelcoming and confronts them with a list of rules. You have to stop. So we see thou shalt not, a pause. That means this could be a physical pause. The person stops at the chapel gates and is stopped by these words. They can't go into the chapel, thou shalt not. And this shows us just how restrictive this chapel really is. It also highlights the poet's disapproval and anger towards the chapel. Question 8. Provide your opinion of the poet's tone of criticism towards the priests and church of his time. This is a 2-mark question. The poet's disapproving tone and criticism towards the priest and church of his time is justified as they are responsible for enforcing the man-made restrictions, which kills the joy and freedom of living. Basically, the poet says that the priests and the chapel are responsible for enforcing organized religion on us. He says that they are the ones who are teaching organized religion and are ensuring that we adhere and abide by their rules and restrictions. So he sort of blames them here. Question 9. Refer to line 7, thou shalt not. Describe the effect of these words in the poem. These words have a negative and harsh connotation. Once again, they are associated with negative feelings or negative vibes. The words portray a command, an allusion to the Old Testament, which disregards free will. Thou shalt not is a command, and it takes away your free will, it takes away your choice. It's telling you, you will not. These words emphasize the restrictive and repressive nature of organized religion. The full stop creates a sense of finality to obey this command. It appears as if free will is no longer an option. Question 10. Refer to line 12, binding with briars. Explain the effectiveness of the description. 2 marks. The description is effective as it portrays how freedom, joys, and desires are restricted in a painful way, because briars are a thorny type of bush, which means if you touch them, they will prick you and it will be sore. So guys, I hope this video has helped. If it has, please remember to like and subscribe, and please feel free to comment down below and let me know if there are certain poems or videos you would like to see on my channel. Thanks for watching.